this video lecture, I'd like to cover with you or go over some of the concepts that we have learned about so far in this class. Please keep in mind that this overview or quick review in no way substitutes a study guide that you already received that you are cueing yourself from to be able to be prepared to take the midterm. Let's talk about some of the highlights from the different chapters, starting with obviously chapter 1. In this chapter, we found out what communication characteristics are, and there are 5. The first one is communication is inescapable, communication is irreversible, communication is complicated, communication emphasizes content and relationship dimensions, and also communication is governed by rules. Let's talk about what it means for communication to be inescapable. Think about how people cannot not communicate. You're always saying something by the way that you dress, by the way that you behave, and so people are always getting the message from you, even when you think that you did not intend to say, or if your message was misunderstood. Just be aware that we're always saying something, even when that message was not intended to be in the way that you thought it was. Communication is reversible. Keep in mind that once you say something, specifically if you happen to offend somebody, then it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to take that back. So be careful with what you say, because you can try to do damage control, you can apologize, but once something is out, it's nearly impossible to take that back. What about communication is complicated? Think about how people, generally speaking, more often than not, are judged by their behavior and not necessarily your intentions. Your intentions may be good, but if you're reflecting something else, then you're going to be judged by your behavior and not necessarily your intentions. Communication emphasizes content and relationship dimensions. With this idea, you need to consider how the meaning of the content and the message changes based on who you say this to. When you consider the words, I love you, then depending on who you say this to, the meaning is going to change, or the message is going to change the meaning based on who you say it to. If you say it to your parents or to your significant other, the meaning is going to change. So remember that messages or communication emphasizes content and relationship dimensions. Again, meaning that the message is going to, or the meaning of the message is going to change based on who you say it to. Communication is governed by rules. Rules can be formal and informal. Formal rules are the ones that we use, that we all have an understanding that we're supposed to follow the exact same principles in order for this message to be interpreted in a very specific way. We have rules of grammar, for example, that we use to write or to speak, so that there is no miscommunication, and we know that when we follow these rules, we have or we end up with the intended effect that we meant to. Rules can also be informal or assumed, and these are, for example, etiquette that we follow when, say, if you were on a crowded bus and you're taking a seat, but an elderly person comes up, then you would think that you would stand up for that person to take your seat. And this conveys something it conveys a message to everybody else that is based on respect, and that's what you're saying. Let's go on to chapter 2 and talk about what the self-concept and the self-esteem are. The self-concept is the relatively stable set of perceptions that you hold of yourself. And it's different from the self-esteem because the self-esteem are your evaluations of self-worth. So the self-concept is who you believe you are, and the self-esteem has to do with whether you like yourself. What is the self-fulfilling prophecy? The self-fulfilling prophecy comes about when you wish for something to happen, you think that something is going to happen, but then you also behave in a way that is consistent with how you want that to happen. So if you're now getting a degree at Tacoma Community College, then your self-fulfilling prophecy can be that you know you want to get a degree, and that's kind of your wish or your hope, but what are you doing to accomplish that goal? So the way that you behave reinforces the way that you feel, and the way that you think, and the way that you wish, how you're going to attain that goal that you come up A self-fulfilling prophecy is how you wish for something to happen, but you also do something about it. Let's talk about the definition of attitude, belief, and value. Let's talk about attitude. Attitude is a predisposition to respond either positively or negatively to a concept, object, or idea. It's a predisposition. And that means that this is the way that you feel about the things that you do before you actually do those things. So the way that you behave has to do with how you feel about the things that you do. Let's talk about value. Value has to do with morals, because these are the things that your parents perhaps taught you that certain things are right and certain things are wrong. For example, when you say that someone has a good moral value or character, such as I know I'm not going to steal because that is not consistent with my moral values. I know I'm not going to lie because I know that that's not the right thing to do. And this is different from belief, because beliefs are the things that you believe to be right or wrong from the way that we exist. And in this instance, for example, we could talk about what my beliefs are, say, based on religion or politics. Do I believe that there is a greater being that is overlooking the face of the world, humanity, and do I worship a certain God? What do I believe that, or how do I believe that this is real? So these are your beliefs. Let's now talk about the perception process. This is an important part of the chapter, and you have to be able to remember the steps of perception. The way that I describe it is slightly different from the way that it's been described to you from the book. It's the exact same information, just slightly different with different words. So perception is the way that we select, organize, store, and interpret information that comes to us from the environment to help us create a picture of the world around us. Perception is subjective and creative. This means that you and I can be looking at the exact same image, and yet we're bound to interpret what we're seeing in very different ways, because your past experiences have shaped the way that you interpret the way that the world is that we're experiencing now. So we all have different experiences in life, and that influences to see the world or the images that we have in the way that we do, and that helps us interpret or form our perception of how things are. One example that I can tell you about is if you grew up being really, really, really poor or very, very wealthy, then you know that you have different types of appreciation for different things, right? If you grow up poor, perhaps you tend to value your belongings a little more. And it doesn't mean that someone who grew up wealthy is not going to appreciate that, but we do have this generalization that is there for a reason, that sometimes when people grow up without much, then they tend to value whatever little bit they have. What about, let's not talk about what stereotyping is. The stereotyping has to do with making generalized assumptions based on limited experiences. So that's why we oftentimes have these conceptions about, say, what other people are. That's what we stereotype about, say, for example, I know that people stereotype me for being Hispanic and thinking that, say, that I only speak Spanish, or that I must be from Mexico, or so what things do you stereotype about when you have generalized assumptions based on limited experiences? On chapter 3, we read about how people attach meanings to words. This means that meanings are in people and not necessarily in words. What people intend to say is far more important than the words they use. You know that sometimes people can be sarcastic, and so they are using words that makes them sound that they're being sarcastic, but so they are meaning to say something else.